Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into what has to be one of the most unbelievable, visually staggering stories of human resilience in modern history. We're talking about the life of Tsutomu Yamaguchi. This is a man whose sheer existence challenges everything we think we know about luck, fate, and basic survival. Let's kick things off with a pretty wild scenario. I want you to imagine the absolute statistical impossibility of living through two nuclear blasts in just 3 days. We're talking about being less than 2 miles from the epicenter of the most destructive weapons humanity has ever unleashed. Not once, but twice. I mean, it sounds like complete science fiction, right? But for Yamaguchi, this was his terrifying reality. To really grasp how surreal this whole thing is, let's drop right into the action. It's 11 a.m. on August 9th, 1945, in Nagasaki. Yamaguchi is standing in his office, frantically trying to explain to his supervisor the blinding flash that wiped out Hiroshima 3 days prior. His boss literally looks at him and calls him crazy, insisting there's no way one single bomb could destroy an entire city. And right at that exact moment, the second bomb flashes blindingly white outside their very window. Okay, let's break down how this actually happened. In part 1, 2 bombs, 3 days. Let's rewind just a bit and map out exactly how this 29-year-old Marine engineer ended up right in the middle of this historical anomaly. The timeline here is incredibly tight. He was in Hiroshima on a 3-month business trip from Mitsubishi. August 6th was supposed to be his very last day. After surviving that first blast, he navigates an absolute nightmare to catch a train on August 7th. He arrives back in his hometown of Nagasaki on the 8th, only to be bombed again the very next morning. Just picture the sheer macro-scale destruction following that first bomb, little boy. Yamaguchi was less than 2 miles away from the epicenter. To even make his way to the train station the next day, he had to cross an apocalyptic landscape. We're talking about literally swimming through a river of floating bodies just to reach the surviving transit lines. So, how do you survive the unsurvivable? Well, in Hiroshima, it was his naval air raid training that saved him. He saw the parachutes fall and immediately dove into a muddy potato patch, plugging his ears, covering his eyes, right before being sucked up by this tornado-like shockwave. In Nagasaki, it was honestly geographical and architectural luck. The naturally hilly landscape of the city, combined with a reinforced office stairwell, muffled the devastating shockwave of a much larger plutonium bomb. 2 months later, Japanese soldiers would survey the devastating aftermath of the Fat Man bomb in Nagasaki. When that second shockwave hit Yamaguchi, the bandages covering his severe burns from Hiroshima were blown completely off his body. Yet, despite being hit by another massive surge of radiation and flying glass, he miraculously walked away from this blast too. He rushed home through the rubble and, unbelievably, found his wife and infant son had also survived. Now, here's a number that might actually surprise you. 160. It's estimated that around 160 people actually experienced both of these atomic blasts. A lot of them were coworkers or people who fled the initial devastation in Hiroshima, seeking refuge in Nagasaki, only to be struck all over again. But out of all those 160 people, Yamaguchi holds a unique historical distinction. He is the absolute only one officially recognized by the Japanese government with this double survivor status. He applied for this recognition late in life, specifically because he wanted his double radiation exposure on the official record, so he could tell the younger generation the horrifying history of these bombings. Which brings us to part 2, the silent family burden. You know, while surviving the blasts themselves was a miracle, the aftermath was this grueling, decades-long battle. The lingering effects of radiation plagued his entire family. Yamaguchi himself suffered from ruptured eardrums, temporary baldness, and eventually acute leukemia. His wife, Hisako, was soaked in radioactive black rain in Nagasaki and later passed away from kidney and liver cancer. And their children? From a son born months before the blast to daughters born years later, they endured constant, severe health issues. And here's a deeply heartbreaking detail. Japanese industry was struggling post-war, and companies were routinely firing anyone weakened by radiation sickness. So to keep his job as an engineer, just to put food on the table, Yamaguchi actually begged his doctors to fake his severely low white blood cell counts. He carried this immense, crippling physical burden in total silence. But even amidst all that darkness, there were these profound pockets of hope. Yamaguchi's son, Katsutoshi, developed infant tuberculosis, and the doctors gave him just 5 months to live. But on the way home from the hospital, the little boy found an abandoned puppy. His parents let him keep it, figuring, he only had months left anyway. That stray dog gave the boy such a fierce will to live that he totally defied the odds and lived for another 59 years. Let's move on to part 3, finding his voice. For decades, Yamaguchi was just a silent father trying to survive. He refused to speak publicly about what he went through. But the ultimate turning point finally came in 2005. His son, Katsutoshi, who had survived for so long, eventually succumbed to multiple radiation-induced cancers. Watching his son die and drawing a blackened, charred image of a bombed Mary to show him in his final days, that finally pushed Yamaguchi to break his silence. He realized his survival wasn't just some stroke of luck, it was a profound duty. So, in his 80s and 90s, he started traveling, and this quote perfectly distills his core philosophy. He famously stated that he hated the atomic bomb because of what it does to the dignity of human beings. He spoke all over, even at the United Nations in New York. And the thing is, he wasn't speaking out of anger or a desire for vengeance. He was advocating fiercely for total nuclear disarmament because he knew firsthand how these weapons literally strip away our human dignity. Of course, as his story spread globally, there were some cultural clashes. In 2010, the British comedy panel show QI featured Yamaguchi. The host and guests jokingly referred to him as the unluckiest man in the world, which drew laughs from the audience. Over in Japan, this triggered severe backlash. Yamaguchi's daughter went on national news to say she felt profound sadness, not anger, but sadness, that the horrific reality of the atomic bomb was being used for comedy. The BBC did later apologize and delete the segment, but it remains a stark example of how differently this history is processed. And that brings us to our final section. The legacy lives on. What's truly beautiful about Yamaguchi's legacy is the complete lack of bitterness. Right after the war, he actually worked as an English translator for the U.S. occupation forces. He helped young, homesick American soldiers write letters back home, starting with, "Dear Mom and Dad." He realized right then that the innocence and warmth of people's hearts are the exact same worldwide. For him, that experience completely erased the concept of enemies and borders. And soon, his story is going to reach its biggest audience yet. Back in December 2009, just weeks before Yamaguchi passed away at 93, Hollywood director James Cameron visited him in the hospital. Cameron promised to pass on his message. And that promise is actually being fulfilled with the upcoming feature film adaptation of the book Ghosts of Hiroshima, ensuring that Yamaguchi's pledge to tell the younger generation this terrifying history will absolutely be kept. Just before he died, he passed the torch to his daughter and granddaughter with this powerful ultimate mission, telling them, "Everybody has a conscience. I hand over my life to you." He deeply believed that a shared human conscience could transcend any difference in race or language. Which brings us to the end of this explainer and leaves us with a pretty massive question to ponder. Tsutomu Yamaguchi survived the unsurvivable to leave us a warning. As we stand in an era where nuclear tensions absolutely still exist, what are we going to do with the legacy of the only officially recognized twice-bombed man? How should humanity wield the devastating power we've unlocked? And what is the true cost we're willing to pay? Thanks so much for joining us.